Oh, are you there, Claire and Mick? Are you there?
Crispin, how are you?
Yes. Good. Thank you for agreeing to speak. I know you've got to get off to the Parliament at 1 o'clock, so you can't do it. But this is great that you can give us some of your time before then. As so many people want to hear more about you both, because you've been speaking out so well especially on Ukraine, that we just want to know what you're about. And I've only just sort of looked into it, and you're in a party called Independence for Change. Can you tell me how that party came about?
God, how long have you got? I mean, I suppose the first thing is I want to thanks a million for having us. It's not really a party. I suppose we've a tradition in Ireland of kind of independence. So people kind of get elected as themselves. So I come from a long line of sort of lefty Trotskyist background, which I kind of left when I was in the Irish Parliament, but always a student politics radical. Mick was a successful businessman. So we were kind of elected in our own right. The party was really just a technical arrangement that we put together when we were both in the Irish Parliament at all, to get access to different resources, and we would have worked with people who were kind of like-minded independents. So our whole method of operating is that we're not really a party at all. We kind of do what we like.
I mean, do you think the party systems restrict expression and ability to change things?
Actually, I've come to the conclusion that they have, and Mick has never been in a political party. I was in one all my adult life, from my student days to my time in the Irish Parliament, and I honestly think that, yes, since I left and became an independent, I think I've been more effective because I can say what I like. I don't have to worry about what the party says or pandering to the party. But Mick's view is probably different because he was never in one.
Yeah, well, I adapted the Groucho Marx School of Philosophy at an early age, and Groucho Marx says he had nothing to do with any party that would even have him as a member. So I was totally in agreement with that approach. I didn't see much point in being in politics if I had to do what I was told. I reckon that if I wanted to be to make an impact and be effective, then I had to be free, and you couldn't be free in a party. You just towed the party line. I mean, we've observed the party structures in Ireland, and I mean, when, for example, you have Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael in power, okay, let's just call it Fianna Fáil. It wasn't Fianna Fáil in power. Okay, they put a number of guys on the cabinet, and then would say there was a time when they would have had maybe 80 deputies in total. So they'll have about, let's say, a cabinet of about 14. Well, the others would not be allowed, and you'd be talking about, I would say, another 66 deputies who would not be allowed to actually have any minds of their own, to just do and say what they're told. And the truth was that someone like us as independents in opposition, we were having much more of an impact on the Irish Parliament than the 66 nodding donkeys in an established party who just turned up to vote as they were requested, and followed the party line morning, noon and night, whether they agreed with it or not. So I didn't see an awful lot of logic to that.
I mean, that sort of rings true with the situation in the UK, because we've got these two main parties who kind of dominate. And as you saw yesterday, they had the RMT went on strike, and the Labour leader Keir Starmer said that no Labour front benchers should go on the picket line. So we've been squeezed out. All the socialists have been squeezed out by the party system. So what do you think about what's happening? What do you think about what's happening to the Labour Party here and socialism in the UK? Because obviously we had Jeremy Corbyn giving us all this hope for a few years. Do you think it's possible for that to come back?
Well, look, it's very hard. Obviously, we don't have a magic wand, and actually, Jeremy Corbyn is over here tomorrow at an event in the Parliament about I suppose, the challenges facing the left in Europe, and he's been invited to speak as a guest of one of the MEPs from the Syriza movement, and they're divided in about 17 different parts at the moment, but they're all different. That was a kind of a bottom-up movement at a certain stage, I suppose. So, look, we've struggled with the idea of the British, why Jeremy Corbyn, I suppose, didn't set up a different party, and why that isn't possible in the UK. I don't know. His election and the movement around momentum and that idea of a bottom-up grassroots Labour Party with socialist ideas and pushing it forward gave a lot of people hope across Europe. But why? I don't know why he hasn't done that, or why it's not possible in the British system. To us, it seems that Labour is kind of irreformable, really. And with Keir Starmer at the helm, my God, a Labour leader who can't support strikes, for God's sake, like, seriously.
Well, I can sympathise with Corbyn not actually going out and forming another entity and trying to actually get into government. I think it's incredibly difficult. And I'd say his best chance was actually through the framework of the existing Labour Party, right? Warts and all, and problematic as it was. I think his decision to try and do it through the existing structure was a rational one. And obviously, it was very unfortunate that he was actually kind of shafted by the inside of the party. The Blairites didn't want him. I mean, they actually preferred the Conservatives to actually win that election rather than Corbyn, which is scary in many ways. But I mean, you have a big problem. I mean, it's not just the UK, right? But most countries have a problem with politics. And the right wing, I mean, the European Parliament is, conservatively, we would say, is 90% right wing. And that's a conservative figure. It's probably a little higher, right? Which is not a healthy situation. But if you look at what's gone on in the UK, when Blair took over, I think Blair was first elected in '97, was it? Yeah. I mean, you know, he brought Labour to a position where they were almost indistinguishable from the Tories. And one of the best quotes ever from Maggie Thatcher was that her greatest achievement was Tony Blair, because she managed to convince enough people in the Labour element to actually appoint a right-wing neoliberal like Tony Blair as their leader, and he dragged them. People would argue that they were left of centre, but we would say they were well right of it. And it kind of done away with what we think of as the Labour Party. So you don't really have one anyway. Mm-hmm. And Corbyn made a good fist of retrieving that. Wasn't easy. And I think his work and how close he got to actually getting into government, it was amazing. And you must remember, right, politics today, I mean, the big business class have kind of taken control of it. They control the media. Mainstream media has gone to the dogs. They work with the establishment. Look, for example, in Ireland, we have the state-affiliated TV station and radio, RTE, spouting the US imperialism line morning, noon and night. And they think that it was a good idea to shut RT down because they were spouting out Russian propaganda. Of course, they were spouting out Russian propaganda. But the RTE in Ireland, Radio Television, they spout out US imperialism propaganda. And our argument was we voted against the banning of RT because we said, yeah, everybody engaged in disinformation and propaganda. Let the people listen to both sides and make up their own minds. But I mean, in terms of British politics, it's a big challenge to change the present scenario. But you know what? I find that the right wing have gone so far and they have monopolized politics so much and the media. I think they're going a bit too far. And listen, we always say that politicians don't change the world. The public do, the people do, right? And we're dependent on the people to actually go out on the streets and make that difference, because don't expect your politicians to change the world. right? We're facing a huge challenge retrieving any element of even a dissenting voice now, right? You're not allowed to think different than what they say.
I'm just aware of the time. I want to move on, because what I wanted to say to you was that we've been despondent over here about what's happened to Jeremy Corbyn, Labour Party, and Keir Starmer coming in and having these 10 pledges that he's reneged on, and suspending Jeremy Corbyn, taking the whip away from him. I've been suspended from the Labour Party, nearly expelled for nothing at all, really. So what happened was, when we had this Ukraine situation, we all felt that we don't want militarization of Ukraine. We want peace. This is the way forward. And then you had all the media here saying, we've got to give weapons to Ukraine, sanctions, and anyone who dissents from that is a Putin apologist. And most of the MPs in Parliament agreed to go along with that idea. Jeremy Corbyn was the exception. Lots of people tried to, a few people tried to sign a stop the war letter, and they were told to take their names off that by Keir Starmer. So we were all sitting around feeling deflated. And then Clare had a clip on social media, and I had never heard of you, Clare. I'm sorry to say that, but I hadn't heard of you before.
All right.
And I'm just going to play. I'm not sure if there's probably more than one clip, but this clip here was one that I thought was of interest.
That you support the lack of sanctions against an aggressor committing war crimes. Do I understand you correctly that your idea how to save Ukrainian children is not to provide the arms to protect them? Do I understand you correctly that you justify one war crime referring to other war crimes? If this is the case, this is shameful. We are not a NATO tool. We are NATO, and we need to defend each and every Ukrainian citizen. Thank you.
Onorevole Daly, ha facoltà di replicare.
Thanks, colleague. I would love colleague Jambaski to tell me any circumstance in which NATO has played a productive role or delivered peace anywhere. History has taught us that sanctions do not end military conflicts. They do not bring peace. They make the people suffer, not the oligarchs, the people of Russia, the people of Europe. And they're not going to help save lives, because the more arms you pump into Ukraine, the more the war will be prolonged, the more Ukrainians will die. And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
Grazie. Cari colleghi.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm afraid, Mrs. Daly, we've given you the opportunity to reply. So let us try and stay calm so that we can continue the debate.
No, I did. I obviously, it's quite amusing to see that guy storming off with putting his mask on in some way. But honestly, that was so refreshing to people over here to hear you talk like that. And then subsequently, the media has gone on your case, both of you. I mean, I've looked on YouTube yesterday, and there's so many sort of, they're wrong, they're destroying Ireland's reputation, etc., etc. I just want to say that since I saw your clips, I actually want to go to Ireland far more than I did before.
Don't do it.
More interested in Ireland than I've ever been. But what do you think of the EU? Because the question that I keep seeing is you are actually, it seems to me, trying to save the reputation of the EU by putting forward these alternatives to the main ideas that the 90% are saying, and they seem to be just ridiculing you or storming off. Do you think the EU is capable of change to become of use to the people of Ireland and elsewhere in Europe?
There's so many issues there, Crispin, and the gas thing is the guy who kind of blue carded me there had been reprimanded the day before for giving a Nazi salute in the chamber. But the way in which the Irish media portrayed the exchange wasn't sort of Irish representative attacked by somebody convicted of a Nazi salute in Parliament. It was rather man in suit criticises Clare Daly. Oh my God, what an embarrassment and disgrace for Ireland that this woman gets up and gives this speech when the nice, respectable MEPs don't like it. And the reason why my voice was raised was because they were all shouting and roaring about how they needed to have more arms, more sanctions. We were a disgrace. And the Irish media has picked up that mantra. And your point about the EU, and it links in with your point about the UK as well, is that the gap between the political establishment everywhere and the people is huge. Because as Mick says, particularly in the case of the war in Ukraine, public opinion has been monopolized. It's not what people think, but people are being bullied and terrorized into being afraid to raise their voices. I mean, I've been in politics for about 30 years and I've always been an oppositionist and a lefty, and I'd be used to sort of criticism, but nothing like what we've experienced now. Like the avalanche against us now hasn't been just because of that speech. We've been getting it really since the start of the war, because there's a section of the Irish establishment who never liked the fact that the Irish electorate, being a neutral country, always returned people who were kind of Euro-critical, which we think is a good thing. The European Union is supposed to be an alliance of nations, which means we're all different. But that's not allowed now. We've been criticised for being neutral, whereas we think actually as a neutral country that was formerly colonised by our big neighbour, we've a lot to offer, because a lot of the people calling the shots in the EU, well, traditionally it was the former colonial powers who still want to be colonialists, and then it is these ultra right-wing lunatics in Eastern Europe who are obsessed with Russia. So is there hope for the European Union? It's built on structures of, it's wedded to neoliberalism. There's a huge gap between the citizens and the people. But actually, both of us, since we got elected here, we're from a small country on the periphery. We get contacted by people all over Europe every day kind of saying, oh my God, I love Ireland. I wish I was in your country. They must be so proud of you. And we go, well, actually, have a look at a few newspapers. We've gone from being the darlings of, we were acceptable across the board, right to left, although we're obvious lefties. Nobody could say a bad word about us because of the work we did in the Irish Parliament. Now we have been presented as pariahs, as polarising influence, when all we've done is argue for peace and diplomacy instead of for war. It's incredible how the propaganda machine has marshaled public opinion, and it's as a result of the placement of, I suppose, the capture of NGOs, the creation of NGOs funded by US think tanks, the National Endowment to Democracy, the funding of Western media. They've all their little bots in place and they're all on message. So the alienation you feel that what's been said is not representing you, I can guarantee you there's people all over Europe and the world who feel the same. And the problem we all have is that we've no vehicle of kind of organising that dissent. It's kind of mad. But is the European Union salvageable? Not the way it's going at the moment, for sure, but the people of Europe have to find a different way of organising across boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, Mick, you were talking about the food crisis in a speech as well, about how people in the southern hemisphere are struggling with food, and that's, you said it, is it as much to do with climate change or the EU's strategy? I mean, you sort of you really railed in about that. How was the response to that one? I bet they weren't cheering you there.
No, but listen, we don't contribute in the Parliament to be cheered. We're trying to speak the truth, and we speak it without fear or favor, and we're just doing our best. Look, the truth is that something that they've been very slow to take on, but over half the world's population has refused to agree with the sanctions against Russia because they're actually not helpful. The war and Russia's war against Ukraine, I mean, that to invade another sovereign country is illegal, irrespective of whether you were provoked or not. It's illegal to invade a foreign country, and the war has impacted on the price of energy, price of food, and a lot of other things as well, with commodities going through the roof. But what the EU is refusing to actually acknowledge is that their sanctions are causing at least as much trouble as the war itself, if not more. And the global south know that. They realize, and they have said it. The African Union came out 10 days ago and said that because of the EU sanctions on the SWIFT system, they find it difficult to actually even buy stuff from people they want to buy it from. And Russia is a massive exporter of food, a massive exporter of fertilizer. You don't have to like the war, but the sanctions are self-defeating. The sanctions are also going to cause hunger in poorer countries, particularly in the global south. And the EU is refusing to acknowledge that. We're prepared to even damage, we're looking at inflation at the moment at 8.1% in the EU, with a potential of it reaching 10 before the year is out. We're prepared to undermine the living standard of citizens in Europe. We're prepared to risk people in the global south dying of hunger in order to impose sanctions that suits the geopolitical agenda of the US and NATO. And that's the real kernel of the problem. The EU has become so subservient to the US agenda. That is scary. We are no longer independent. And you ask, can the EU survive? Well, yeah, it can survive, but not in its present form. It was built with the idea that it would prevent European nations from fighting with each other. And that was a great ambition. But in actual fact, now we're at a situation where military activity has been prioritized over dialogue and diplomacy. Did we ever think that the EU would get to this stage? And as Clare has said earlier, it has become a bit of a neoliberal club, and that's enshrined in the constitutions and treaties. And that has to change if they want to protect the EU in the long term.
And I think it gets us back to where we started, because if Corbyn had kind of got elected, if in this context of ye staying in the European Union and had that radical leadership at the helm and broke some of the constraints of the EU and led a sort of a Europe-wide movement, he would have had an enormous hearing. I mean, that's what we find more than everything. We get contacted by people every day across Europe saying that nobody in their country is representing them. And I suppose our thing is that you don't need to have a party to have an ideology. There's ordinary people out there, and we think it's people who change the world. The politicians lag behind. And in the context of the war, you say, well, why isn't there more people on the streets? I think they've been bullied into silence. But I think the cost of living now and the economic consequences of the war are forcing people out on the streets. There's been protests in Ireland. Belgium is practically shutting down. We've strikes morning, noon and night, which is brilliant. Literally, they can't stop striking over here. And I think that will obviously is going to be replicated in the UK as well, as ordinary people seek to find a way out. And it's out of that we have to find a new collective voice, I think, because the disconnect is huge.
Well, I've got to finish the interview now because I've got other people coming on to the show to talk about what you're saying and what you're doing. But I just want to say that you both of you are heroes of the left here in the UK, and you've given us some hope that by speaking out as you are, you've given us some hope, and it shows that there is power even in two individuals who, you know. And I appreciate the other thing is I appreciate you having such flack from what's going on. If you ever want to come over to England for a bit of a break, and we can put you in a safe house where no one can get at you, you're welcome to come over.
What's the beer like?
Oh, well, it's probably not as good as what you're used to, but you might have
probably
have
not. No, yeah. But look, don't lose hope, right? We, as I say, we're getting grief from the establishment. Real people can see through it, not just in the UK, everywhere around the world. We just have to find a way of how we can collectively express that.
And people should always remember the famous words of Noam Chomsky. When someone challenged him one day about 15 or 20 years ago and said, "Noam, you know, you do great work and you've made such an effort at trying to change things and make things better. Do you not think that this is a useless exercise? The power of money and business is just too strong against you?" And Chomsky says, every single person in the world can make the world a better place each day. And sometimes, he says, it only takes the smile. Don't ever give up hope.
Right, cool. I like that. You've got a load of good quotes. You'd be a good after dinner speaker.
He'd be great.
We'll
be looking for a job after this, but I don't think we'll go for that one.
Thank you both for coming on. Cheers.
Thanks.
Have a good vote in Parliament. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.